Hi, my name is Andrei Stoica. I'm an entrepreneur and I've started several high technology companies, spent pretty much all of my professional career in Silicon Valley. And I want to tell you a story that happened to me back in 1999 that I think has a lot of relevance to what's going on here in Brazil and in Sao Paulo in particular. So in the late 90s, a bunch of friends of mine and I graduated from Stanford University, which is a school right in the middle of Silicon Valley. And then we went out and we started a company. At that time, it was the internet boom. Everything was growing, everybody was really excited. It was the first wave of companies to use the internet. Just to give you a sense, if you wanted to do a search back then, you went to either Yahoo or AltaVista or Excite. You probably don't even remember most of these names because most of these companies don't even exist now. It was before the time of Google. So we were sitting there in the office in one summer and we were looking around what new companies were happening, what was going on, what new technologies were popping up. And we came across this project that was being done at Stanford by two graduate students. Now these guys came up with something really awesome. Their search was so much better than anything available out there, but it was still a small project. You could only search within Stanford University. So we said, okay, these guys are like 10 minutes away. Why don't we call them up and invite them out for coffee? So we went over there, and I still remember the summer day it was. There's only one coffee house on the entire campus. We were sitting there on at a table, and there were these two guys, and then Craig, my friend Matt, and myself, and we're starting to chat to these guys. And they were interesting, and we had a good talk. You might know their names by now. They're Larry Page and Sergey Brin. And you might have heard of their project. It's called Google. It was called Google back then too, but it wasn't a company yet. They hadn't even received $1 of investment. This was just a couple of guys doing a cool research project. So Matt turns to them at the end of the conversation and says, you know, you're intelligent guys. We're intelligent guys. We're doing something cool and we've already got a company. Why don't you come and join? You know, we can make money together. At which point, I remember these guys turning to each other and smiling and looking back and saying, you know, we're pretty happy with what's happening and we're getting a lot of interest in this Google project we're doing, so I think we're going to stick with it. And at that point, Matt turns to Larry Page and he says something that we will never forgive him for. He looks at him and he says, "You'll regret it." So I don't think Larry Page has regretted it because if I come to Brazil these days, I fly United, and if he comes to Brazil, he probably flies his own 747 jet. But that experience taught me two really important things that I think are really very relevant to what's going on here. Number one is that it's really hard to tell when you're in the middle of a revolution. When you're looking at the future face to face, it doesn't look that special. I mean, we're sitting across the table from two guys that were going to revolutionize the way that the entire humanity was going to use information. And that was just a year or two in the future. But right then and there, we were looking at two graduate students that were nerds, just like us, and just like so many hundreds of other graduate students on campus. There wasn't anything very different. And their project, it was cool, but it wasn't, I mean, there was tons of other cool projects going on at Stanford at any given time. But these guys, in a couple of years, were going to start a revolution in the way all of humanity was going to use information. There was really no way to tell. The future looked kind of normal. I think this is what's happening in Brazil. You look around, there's something different. There's something changing. It's very different from Brazil 10 years or even 100 years ago, and I think it's going to stay. The second thing is a little bit more subtle. When we were, at this point in 1999, we were in the middle of what was being called the internet boom. 2 years later, it was being called the internet bubble. So what was the difference? What's the difference between a boom and a bubble? Well, back then you could kind of tell there was something wrong. Companies that were just 6 months or 12 months old were being given valuations that were huge. They hadn't even shipped one product. They hadn't even made $1 in revenue, but their valuation was sky high. And the value that they provided was very low. The difference was huge. Here, the prices are going up, but the value is not that much different. there might be a little bit more valuation than value, but it's not a huge gap. So when people talk about a bubble, I tell them, well, ask yourself this: do you feel that there is a huge gap between valuation and value? Because if there is, then there's a bubble. But I don't think so. And that's why I live here in Sao Paulo. And that's why I think there's great opportunities here. So I hope you enjoyed the story, and that's my perspective.